Welcome to Decanted with Dave Grega. On this episode, which is episode 3, I have Priyanka French. She is the head winemaker at Signorello Estate, an inspirational figure, someone that I actually have a lot of respect for and that I've come to know a little bit just in my experience in the wine business, and someone who has an amazing story. So we are going to decant Priyanka and her story and who she is, because I think it's really important for us to know a little bit more about this person. Priyanka, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, and I really appreciate you spending some time. I know you're very busy. You've got a huge remodel going on with the winery and all types of other things. And I wanted to kind of start out by getting into the origin story. You know, where did this all start? Where are you from? What was your sort of upbringing like, and what does that look like? Just you can share that, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is pretty fun way to start off the new year. My background kind of starts in India, in Mumbai. I was born and brought up in one of the biggest cities in the world. Both my parents had absolutely nothing to do with wine or even food and beverage. They're both physicists with PhDs and incredibly smart, intelligent people. And I was born a very confused soul, I think. There was always a question in my mind of, what am I going to do? But I was very clear about the things that I didn't want to do. So for the longest time, I thought I would go down the medical profession. And as I, came to an age where those decisions had to be made, I found myself not as excited by that path. And so I really liked the crossover of sciences. I loved, when you aren't, I grew up in a household where pure science was very much a topic of conversation. And for me, application-based science was always something that kind of pulled my curiosity a little bit more. And so I decided for my undergrad to go down, one of the universities had just started this amazing program for food technology and engineering. And it was exactly that combination of sciences between microbiology and biochemistry and, production-based engineering and things like that. And so I kind of just went into it. I've always grown up loving food and loving, textures and flavors and things like that. So I thought it would be a really good fit. And it was, I was pretty excited with what we were learning. I loved the subject material, but I had a little bit of a, come to me moment when we went on our first field trip. And so since it was such a new industry in India, our seniors organized field trips for us to get to know the food industry as it was growing and burgeoning in the country. And we went to, in the span of one day, we went to actually a dairy production plant, to a cookie making factory, and to a spice production place. And I was a little disoriented because between just the lack of excitement about product and the need for uniforms and hairnets and just the lack of input of creativity in a way just kind of left me a little jarred. And I was like, wait, is this my future? Is this what I've chosen? And last place that we ended at was a winery. So we went to Sula Vineyards, which is currently one of the biggest volume producers of wine and brandy in the country. And I think it was kind of that, fall in love moment because we happened to be there during harvest, and wineries never smell better than when you walk in during harvest. And they talked to us about the process, but also about how the process changes every year based on weather conditions and, ripening conditions. And I loved that there was a science, a very hardcore science behind it, but with this ample opportunity for creativity and for really, creating a product that you truly believed in. And so that's kind of where my journey started, right there.
Right. So it kind of provided you with this um, opportunity to merge two things that you did have a feeling that you wanted to work with,
Yeah.
And so it must have been pretty obvious. I mean, I don't want to skip over the fact that, you were born in was it Mumbai, or
Yeah.
is that where you grew up?
No, born
Okay.
and raised, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that right there is pretty cool. I mean, that's the fact that you're here doing what you're doing now, and that's where you started from. Very few people. I don't think anybody really is at the level that you are at within the wine industry, doing what you do in the Napa Valley. At like it's Signorello at a major, well-known winery there, that was born in India. I don't think that that's happened at all. And then you add to that the fact that there are not many women in this business relative to men. Like the ratio is very, very lopsided. So you're kind of this anomaly, which is really fascinating. I'm curious about like what was it like? Because I don't have that experience. I didn't grow up in Mumbai, and I can only imagine. But what was it like growing up in Mumbai? Are there any like stereotypes that maybe are kind of true, or are there any stereotypes that here in America that we might have about what that would be like that maybe aren't? What's that experience like now that you know what things are like here in the United States and whatnot?
I think that's such a great question. Growing up, where I grew up was a really special corner of the city. I think when people think of Mumbai, they think of this big, bustling city, with lots of people and lots of activity, which it very much is. But what a lot of people don't realize, it's also kind of that it's the city that sees the melting pot when it comes to tourism, when it comes to people from all over the country. It's kind of that make your dream come true in the city kind of place, because it definitely has a lot of employment opportunities. It's also where the heart of Bollywood, the movie and film industry is. So there are so many different people trying to make their dreams come true in so many different fields. But the little corner that I grew up in, my father was a scientist at a research institute at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And so we grew up in the housing area that was associated with the university. And I think what that did was right away there was just this absolute absolute kind of ingrained methodology of curiosity. We had one of the biggest, best libraries in the country. Everyone around me was in some form of academics, so there was always very, difficult conversations, but that kind of worked around rational and logic and science and facts, and so it was an exciting place to grow up, because while there were the stereotypes and I love that you asked that question, because yes, there was the stereotype of, you're
Mhm.
either going to be an engineer or you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to go down kind of some kind of academic field. That definitely was the case, and that was definitely the expectation from my parents as well. But at the same time, we were also given a lot of opportunities to explore beyond those realms as well. And so I
Okay.
think that was always exciting. And my father had some really unique opportunities to work abroad while doing his research and kind of creating the collaborations that he did. So I did, when I was very, very young, I spent some time in Iowa. He was at the University of Ames in Iowa for a bit. And then one of his biggest collaborations was with the Osaka University in Japan. So I grew up in Japan for a couple of years. And went to the local elementary school, had to learn a whole new language. And so I feel like my parents and just this unique lifestyle that we had with traveling and the kind of
Hmm.
people we were meeting, it helped me keep my mind open. And, when you grow up in the city of dreams, you grow up a little bit of an idealist. And so that's kind of where I came from, where it was like, I'm going to pursue the life that makes me truly happy. And,
Hmm.
that's something different and something unique, and keeps my extremely hyper brain occupied.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, you're like the perfect kind of person for like a CIA type of job. I mean, you really do. Like, in my limited experience, I mean, in the military, I got to to see a lot of these guys from OGAs, other government agencies, CIA, DIA, and all these things. And like this, you're basically exactly like a case officer background. Like
Yeah.
I would be shocked if I'd be shocked if you're not going to get a message from the CIA to recruit you,
Yeah.
because those are the kind of things that they're looking for. That academic background, but that sort of open consciousness, that curiosity, that wanting to see what's on the other side, wanting to have something to shoot for and to strive for, which I think is really cool.
Well, that's good
God,
to
it's so
know because
fast.
if the whole winemaking thing doesn't work, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna
I'll
start
I'll
trying.
put you in contact with some people.
Perfect.
Yeah, you'd be great. And that, yeah, it's interesting. Gosh, yeah, you're perfect for that. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about when you're talking, I was thinking about James Bond, going back to the CIA thing, and I love James Bond. I'm a big James Bond fan, and I've thought about why that is and what makes James Bond James Bond. And it's not that he's the best at spycraft. It's not that he's the best marksman. It's not that he's the best, at any of these particular things. It's that he's very good at those things, but there's this other component. There's this other dimension to him where he has seemingly sort of like unrelated or even useless information that he knows and cares about,
Yeah.
that don't actually directly apply to a specific mission. For example, go find out who's doing this thing or whatever. Like whether or not you have a suit that is tailored in an Italian fashion or in a Savile Row British fashion, and doesn't really matter when you're talking about this specific mission.
Mm-hmm.
But to him, it matters. And how to make a cocktail, which drink goes with what type of knot to tie in your tie, these seemingly stupid kind of things, arbitrary kind of cultured sort of things, these flavors, this being able to know what kind of glass of Pinot Noir should be served in, and caring enough about that to make time for that, even amidst all this crazy, got to save the world kind of thing. Like that juxtaposition is fascinating, right? It breathes color and life into the experience of who that person is. It makes them magnetic. And I think that you have a similar kind of vibe in that, it's like you have all of these experiences and these things that don't have anything to do with, like, let's say the specific mission of making wine or the science of it, but they really color and make up like a 4-dimensional picture behind this whole thing. And I think that's really cool. And it's something unique that you bring to the table. And so it's kind of interesting to hear that. Yeah.
I mean, Daniel Craig's done filming Bond now.
I know. I'm kind of sad. I really liked his Bond.
I know, me too. I think he was, after Sean Connery, he was probably one of my favorite Bonds. But, I get what you're saying, because I do, I think people have this idea of when they think about a winemaker, they think about just like someone, kind of moving around this dark cellar and, kind of just focused on this one task of, oh, I have to make wine. And what I've learned to love about this industry is that it's so much more than that. And there's so many aspects that really tie into not just a successful product, but the delivery of a successful product into the market. And so, it comes down to needing to know about so many things. You have to know about that intention of sight, but then you have to have the clarity within yourself of what you're trying to do with it. And then even in the cellar, it's not just about knowing the process that needs to happen. It's also about, just the small aspects that help you at least do it more effectively or in a better quality fashion. And then once you've made this product, one of the biggest parts of the job that so many people don't talk about is then communicating all of that to your consumer. So you also have to be able, to have a personality where you can walk into a room and then talk about the process, but not bore people and not get too technical and still make it fun and romantic and exciting. And so I feel like as a winemaker, and the most successful ones that I've seen are people like what you described. They have to be kind of not just a jack of all trades, kind of a king or a queen of all trades. And there needs to be this inherent understanding of how these aspects all tie into each other, about how
Mhm.
when I've finished my Cabernet and my hospitality guy or DTC guy puts it in front of a consumer, is it being paired correctly? Is it being presented in a way that shows that intention and hard work
Yeah.
that's gone behind the making of the product too? So yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious to see what you think about this, but I've always felt that at the end of the day, what we are really selling, that is to say that what really breathes value into the thing that we're selling, is the feeling that somebody has when they interact with our product,
Mhm.
and that's it. Um, the feeling that they get dictates the value that they're going to assign to that product, to that bottle of wine, to that brand. And so, really, what we're talking about is feelings. And there are many different ways to make wine. You have a very academic background. I had almost the complete opposite. I don't have a college degree. And so, but what we're both trying to do is get to a place where we are able to co-create something that makes people feel
Mhm.
a certain way that um, might make them want to build a relationship with those wines and with that brand,
Mhm.
to invest their time, energy, and money into seeking out your wines because your wines made them feel a certain way. And
Mhm.
there's a lot that goes into that feeling. It's not just marketing and it's not just the actual physical product itself. It's kind of this unique co-creative amalgamism of just all of these different things.
Mhm.
And I think that when you have someone who's a head winemaker, they have to embody all of that, and they have to resonate that, and they have to connect these things together. And they're really trying to balance all these things together. But what they're really trying to do is drive a feeling toward the consumer. And so you have to be able to hold that sort of empathetic, feeling based foundation through this whole process.
Mhm.
And that's a difficult thing to be able to do, to balance those things. Usually if somebody's very intellectual, they're sacrificing some social skills and vice versa.
Mhm.
And so in this case, you have to really have a pretty well-rounded ability to do all of them to be very successful in the business. Now,
Mhm.
there are outliers, but exceptions kind of prove the rule sometimes.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to think what you think about the idea of really what we're doing is selling feelings. We're selling a feeling, and that feeling is sort of the worth, the value in our product.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree. I think that, and that, in my opinion, is also what makes wine as a beverage so much more different than other beverages. You look at the spectrum of the beverage industry, and there's spirits, there's beer, there's, now all of these kind of mixed um, cocktail beverages that are coming out. And I think the consumer that really starts to go down the wine rabbit hole is because something in them has felt a connection to this product. And wine, compared to all of these beverages, has historically always sold a story. There's always been, a story associated not just with the product or the brand, but with every year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is why this wine was made this year. And for me, that's always been the most fascinating thing about wine. We're selling not just our perception of a place, but we're also selling our understanding of time. And that's what, for me, the coolest thing about when you open up these older vintages, or you open up wines from winemakers that you look up to, and you taste the wines, you kind of are, taken back to that point where you're like, I wonder why, like, I wonder what made them make these decisions that then put this fascinating, amazing product in the bottle. And so absolutely, I think that we're definitely selling connection, and the way that that connection is made is changing in the industry, in the more recent decade, which is exciting, because I think the consumer now wants to ask more questions to find those points of connection, which is so great. I think historically, wine has made connection more out of intrigue and romanticism, and kind of this mystery element. And now we're really kind of peeling those layers back and talking about farming practices, and labor and estate winemaking and all of these different nuances that truly make our products unique. I mean, Napa isn't a very big area if you were to look at
Mhm.
it from an acreage point of view, but we have people making wine from the same vineyards. We have people making wine adjacent to each other, but the stories and the connection you will feel with each brand is completely different. So, yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think that's probably one of our biggest unique selling points for the beverage, but also a challenge at the same point is how do you make that connection?
Mhm. And it is really hard to do because, the bottom line is that the wine business is a tough business.
Yeah.
And so you've got that pressure and you have that fact. The bottom line is that you have a bottom line. And so, it's always this push pull relationship, I feel like,
Mhm,
between that sort of artistic and then the sort of business side of things.
mhm.
And it's hard to be able to navigate all those things. That's part of the challenge of being a decision maker at the level that you are. So I heard a little bit about how, really your experience in Mumbai kind of set the stage in a lot of ways. Like you were saying, it was sort of a international vibe there. The energy and the spirit was a little bit more like you were talking about, like Hollywood, like go pursue your dreams, be more creative, all those kind of things. And of course, you had probably a traditional cultural component that was
Mhm.
there influencing you. And you kind of talked a little bit about that when we were talking about the stereotypes and things. And then you also have, and I guess that kind of bleeds into, the fact that like your parents were these successful academics, and there is that sort of, vector as well. And that really allowed you to, when you did have those experiences, recognize, oh, this is something that I need to pursue.
Mhm.
Um, as you kind of move along now, I know you end up going to UC Davis, right? And you're studying the viticulture and enology program and stuff. Along the way, what are some of the first kind of not aha moments, but the moments with wine that were kind of transcendent that touched you on that level where you were like, oh, okay, this is turning me on to this even more. This is interesting. This is different. This is something that reinforced that direction, if there are
Um,
any.
oh my God, no, there are so many because I kind of took the plunge, in a way. I was reading about wine back in Mumbai when I decided to kind of start to explore this industry, but there weren't a lot of magazines writing about wine. There wasn't a lot of information. There wasn't a lot of opportunities to taste wine, for example. So I knew like maybe three different varieties that were being made in the country, and if you
Mm-hmm.
at that point were to sit me down and say, okay, let's taste blind and tell me which variety is what, I had no freaking clue. And so I just kind of dove headfirst when I got accepted at Davis and moved, left home and moved to Davis. And our very first week, I remember that orientation day so clearly, because it was our graduate group was brought together and we were given a tour of the teaching vineyards, of the old winery at Vixen Hall. We were shown the construction for what would be the new center for winemaking at Davis. And it was so amazing just to see the access to resources that existed at the university. But at the very end of the day, we walked into the winery, and Chick, who was the teaching winery assistant at the time, rolled out a couple of kegs, gave us a few glasses, and then just started thieving wine from these glasses and said, okay, let's see if anyone can guess the variety. And people were throwing names around like Tempranillo and Grenache and Mourvedre that I had never even heard of. Like, I didn't even know what these words were at that point of time. And I remember just kind of sinking into the corner of the room because I was like, what did I do? Like, what have I gotten myself into? And I went back to my apartment and I told my roommate, I said, ah, shit, I think I've really made a stupid decision here because I have no clue what I've gotten myself into. And she said to me, she said, I think it's unfair for you to give up this easily. You made this big decision. You've spent a lot of money to come here. You've upended your life in a way. So I think the least that you can do is at least give yourself a month and see how you feel. And if after a month you're like, you know what, I definitely made a wrong decision, then you're justified because you've at least tried. And so our first class was wine chemistry, and Professor Ebler at Davis started out the class talking about molarity versus molality and like all of this chemistry stuff. And I looked around, and everyone that was in my class had this kind of blank stare, and I didn't even need her to explain this stuff to me because I just like knew all of it because of
Cool.
my background. And so at that point I remember going, okay, like maybe I know
That's
something,
cool.
And I mean, my graduate group was such amazing people, and we kind of, found each other. So my friend Emily, who now owns her own winery and vineyard in Michigan, she kind of realized that I was intimidated in the tasting settings, and so we started a tasting group. And I didn't have a
Hmm.
car, so she would drive me to Napa and Sonoma, and we would go tasting at wineries and learn about the cultural aspect of wine and not just the academic aspect. And I found this community that really kind of took me in. And we had professors that were willing to open bottles and help us taste on things. And it just became such a fun way not to only get to know the industry, but to forge these relationships and friendships that I didn't really expect. And so that was a big moment for me. I think this kind of support that I received at Davis was just incredible, and they really pushed me when it came to just feeling more familiar and feeling comfortable with the industry. And then when I started doing the traveling, winemaker hemisphere hopping internship thing, it was just so amazing how knowing one person helped open a door of opportunity for another. And I spent about 2.5 years traveling around in out of a suitcase from wine region to wine region, just learning, working at different wineries. And the most amazing thing about it was you weren't just doing, I mean, you were working very hard because you're there during the harvest period and it's long
Sure.
hours and physical work. But at every place that I went to, I was also learning about history, and I was learning about their food. And, when I was in France, I was learning about all of this cheese and music and getting to know people. And like you said, like the reason for this podcast is because we see such an amazing, fascinating group of people find their way into wine, and not many people have the same story of what brought them in. And so for me that was just so exciting. I haven't met till date a boring person in wine. I just haven't. There's always some background, and they're always involved in some kind of cultural arts, whether it's music or performing arts or artistic painting or whatever it is. And so for me, those aha moments kind of just kept building up. It was every time I was like, this is cool, this is great, this is awesome. And I got to travel around the globe, and it ultimately ended up finding the love of my life and my husband along the way. And so it's just, I feel like when you dive into something with intention and excitement, everything just transpires to make it work for you. So yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's really, I think you're spot on. And one thing that you said that really, something that I've always really felt deeply is that sort of concept of how you have all of these people in one small area here in the Napa Valley in particular. Um, and they're all so different and unique and interesting. It's not like, I mean, imagine any other profession, like any other major profession. I think about like if you want to be a lawyer, you want to be the best lawyer, right? So you want to go to the best law school, and there's probably 3 or 4 law schools that limits you to. And then you want to go to the best, firm, and there's probably about maybe 5 firms that would be like the top,
Mhm.
if what you want to be is at the very top. And so and then so it's like just those law schools, the path that you go through and the type of people to get to those type of places is a pretty limited group of people. For the most part, they have relatively similar type of backgrounds. Once you get through that, once you get into this firm, and then you have to work your way up through the firm. Like day one, you're not going to be hanging out with the CEO or with the partners when you're an intern at this law firm. You're not even going to be able to talk to them, right? There's so much separation, and you got to jump through hoops. So it's like by the time you get up to being junior partner, the type of path that needed to be taken to get there is very similar.
Yep.
Right? You kind of all jumped through the same hoops. The wine industry, when you talk about Napa Valley influencing the entire world of wine, Napa Valley is one of the top regions in the world for wine. One of the most influential regions in the world for wine, and it's a very small space. So when you come into the Napa Valley, it's like, you and me are a great example where it's like I have a almost completely different background. Like I said, I don't have a college degree, and my story is just so different. But here we are in this tiny little place making these wines, and it's like that is really cool. Like my journey to get to where I am and your journey are so different. But here we are sitting at the table together, sitting next to each other, working on similar type of problems. And that I think is something that the wine industry has that no other industry does have, which I think is really cool. And just the people I love wine, but I think I might love the experiences and the people a little bit more.
I agree. I think the love for this product gives you so many more, it's like a snowball effect. You walk into a room, whether it's a winery, whether it's an industry event, whether it's a tasting event, whatever it may be. I think you walk into the room because you love the product and you want to get to know more about it and, just kind of expand your knowledge but then you end up doing it through these different people. And one of my favorite ways to talk about this is we have a tasting group that we're involved in. And in this tasting group, there's like two of us that are on the production side that are winemakers, two that are on the hospitality side, two that are, sales and kind of director of sales at different wineries, and one that is in the industry but has kind of taken a little bit of a jump towards marketing and media and things of that sort. And it's just so fascinating because you can put a bottle of wine at this table and everyone has a different aspect to contribute about what they're perceiving from it. And that conversation then leads to just such a fascinating line of thought and, and experiences. And for me, that's just so exciting because you can make this product and then it gets perceived in so many different ways by different people, but it's also the impetus to such great conversation on a table. So, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's kind of, this reminds me of like, the wine industry, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit too about with who you are, with your path into wine. You've had your own unique set of experiences. You've had your own challenges. You've had some things that have been very beneficial and some things that have felt like they've been difficulties and obstacles. And everybody has had their own set of things. It's like, but the bottom line is that like if you're really trying to achieve and you're really also going through this experience with an open heart and you're being changed by the experience and being affected and really immersing yourself in the product, you're opening yourself up to emotional vulnerability as well, which is a part of the sacrifice of being in this business. And it's really meaningful to me, I know, and I'm sure it is to you as well, like this whole thing. And it's like, but it's hard. It's a lot of pressure mentally, physically, emotionally, and it's a ride. And one of the things that I keep coming back to again is like, why is it worth it? And a lot of the reason it's worth it is because of the incredible people I've been able to experience, and also my family. I have 4 kids, and they get to grow up with uncle and auntie so and so and so and so and so and so. A lot of people who you probably know, who are just so fascinating. And they come over and we have dinner, and we're talking about the different types of this and the different types of that. No, I've got I've got a special bourbon over here that's aged in whatever cask. Oh, interesting. Oh, do you have some chartreuse? Yeah, I brought a magnum of VEP, and whoa, smell this, smell that. Telling my kids to smell this, and it's like they're exposed to all this. Like culture is not really the right word. But it's what's coming to mind.
Mm-hmm.
The culture of this. It's so important. And some of my fondest memories are of this kind of group that were friends in the wine business, and we all became really kind of close friends. And this is a while ago, and we had a couple years where we would hang out just all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we would have these sort of like, I don't know, almost like bohemian kind of, hipster, like geeky get-togethers where we'd make like canelés and the little copper molds, and it was just such like a nerdy thing. We'd all bring like these wines, and we'd sit there and we would just geek out over these things, but then also like listen to music. And some people could sing and play guitar and others couldn't, and some people had totally different personalities and backgrounds, and they were all very unique, successful, creative individuals. And that was such an enriching experience for me. And sort of the band kind of broke up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of reasons why, but we just sort of parted ways eventually, and it's sort of like a little chapter. But that's just one of those examples of like what this. I don't know any other industry that can really bring that type of experience together.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about kind of like your tasting groups, and I think that rings really true to me. But along in your story here, we're getting you into that graduate program at the UC Davis, right? So it's pretty much the best in the world, and so that experience alone is really impactful. Before we keep going too far, I'm thinking about your parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking about this, like how we just went from here to Davis, and I'm like, there had to have been some interesting conversations between there and there.
Yeah.
Especially since it seems like, and what kind of physics are they? Is it like quantum physics or like applied physics, or what is it?
Solid state and condensed matter physics. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I was just watching a documentary on infinity last night. So I like have this like little obsession with like theoretical physics. But at any rate, the conversations must have been interesting. Can you talk a little bit about some of those? Like, hey, I'm moving out to California to become a winemaker.
Yeah.
Ta-da! Like, how did that go down? And it's okay if you want to do an impersonation of your dad or something. It's okay to do that, but you don't have to.
Yeah, no, it was a journey for sure. I think I didn't tell them for the longest time because my parents were the kind of people that you just didn't go to them with a whim. If you went to them with a whim, then it just was never taken seriously, because why would you come up to me with a whim? And so I did a lot of background work into the industry, about getting to know it, about getting to know the different regions, about knowing about which universities I have to apply to. And I knew that if I really needed them to support me or to back me up, that the only way for me to do it was to do it in that academic line way. Like I had to go to a good university. I had to show them what my path would really be like for them to to be able to support me, because it was just such an unknown. No one in my close family, in our friends, in our extended family, in our friends, no one is anywhere close to the industry that I'm in. And so, I applied to a couple of universities, and I got accepted into the University of Adelaide. And at that point, I had also been applying to a few universities in Europe. I actually had never thought about applying to Davis, because so many of my colleagues and friends were applying to come to the States. And I was like, why would I go to the United States to learn about wine? Like the birthplace of wine is Europe. Like, why would I go to America to do that? And so the day that I got accepted by the University of Adelaide in Australia, I walked into my parents' bedroom, and they were kind of getting ready for bed. And, I look back and I'm like, what were you thinking? Like, why did you jump this on them right before they were trying to go to bed? But I walked in and I said, hey, and my stomach had been in knots all day since I had that acceptance letter. And I was just like, hey, just wanted to let you know that this is something that I'm fascinated by, and I've been reading about it and studying about it, and I also have a full ride to go and study it at the University of Adelaide in Australia. And they were like, wait, what? And my dad thought I was joking because, they were seeing all these magazines come in, they were seeing the reading material, and they just thought maybe it's just like a hobby on the side. There's no way she's
Sure.
actually going to do this or anything like that. And then I said, no, I'm like applying to these universities and stuff. And that was kind of a what the F kind of moment for them, really, because they were like, and I have to give them credit because they never like got mad at me. They never like yelled and
Mm.
said, absolutely not, you can't do this or anything like that. But they did have very pointed questions, and an interrogation that lasted for many weeks. And so, I appreciate that my father asked me those questions, because the next day he said, well, do women even do this? And
Mhm.
the young Priyanka was just like, oh my God, that's such an old, how can you even ask this question? Like,
Right.
in
This
this
isn't
current
three
age of,
generations ago or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly. In this current age of time and everything. And, but it put me on this path of researching and finding out women winemakers, and getting to know their stories and getting to know their paths, and reading about their interviews. And so I made a PowerPoint presentation for him that I then presented a couple of days later,
Oh my
that talked about women winemakers. And Celia Welch was actually on my PowerPoint presentation, and now, like, I get to work with her.
Yeah.
She's a consulting
Yeah. Yeah.
winemaker. So it's just, there's another aha moment, like, talk about life coming full circle. Um, and so, they listened to that, and they had a couple of meetings with my professors at the university that I was at, that were in the food, beverage, and engineering
Mhm.
industry, and they talked about the potential. Wine was really coming up as an industry in India at the time, and then at the end of the day, when I like showed them the curriculum and I got into date, and well, so I guess backtrack. My uncle, who was in the hotel industry, at the when I told him that this is what I wanted to do, he was so thrilled. He was like, "Oh my God, this is absolutely fascinating and amazing. You have to do it." And he was the one convincing my parents of, like, she's going to be a winemaker. It doesn't mean she's going to be drunk and like an alcoholic. She's going to make the product. And I think that was one of their concerns, was just culturally, women and alcohol, like, how does that all come together? And
Mhm.
so he was the one who pushed me to apply to Davis. He was like, if you're going
Okay.
to go down this path, you have to apply to one of the best schools. Like, I need to know that you're giving it not just 100%, 200%. And so he was the one who pushed me to get into Davis. And I gave all the GRE exams and entrance things and filed my application. And then for some reason, I was admitted to the university, and got a scholarship to be able to enter the university. And so at that point, my parents didn't really have much they could say, because one of my strongest arguments was, I'm not just in the wine department, I'm in the food and wine department at Davis, which is one of the best
Yeah.
schools.
Right.
So if at any point there's any kind of hesitation, I can always just transition back into food engineering and kind
Food
of just
science. Yeah.
go down this path that I've been on. And you can't say no when a university like Davis is now in question. And so
Mhm.
they said, you know what, we'll pay for your ticket, we'll give you the money for your initial down payment for a house and things like that. They didn't have to pay for school. I paid for school myself throughout the 2 years that I was there. And they were excited about it, I think. Well, I think they were very apprehensive. But then when I joined Davis in August of 2009. And January of 2010, my father had a conference in Washington, D.C. And so he came out to Davis after that conference, and I was showing him around the university, showed him our classrooms and our labs and the teaching vineyards and everything. And I'll never forget this, but we were on Skype with my mom, back in the day, and he says to her, he goes, "It's a real thing, like it's a real university." And my mom's just like, "You sent her packing across the world. What did you think she was doing?"
That's cute though.
So
That's fun.
it's been exciting for them, I think, too, because now, they've seen kind of what this journey has brought to me and the
Mhm.
kind of experiences I've had, and now they're retired and they get to come and, hang out with
Okay.
us in the beautiful Napa Valley, and there's never any shortage of wine and food, and I think they're really excited about it now.
So now your dad says, "See, I told you this was a good idea."
Hmm. Hmm. Yep,
Wow.
yep.
Okay. That's
Now,
cool.
now he calls me and he goes, this one of our family friends opened this bottle of Indian wine at dinner, and I didn't think it was very good. And I'm like, yeah, because you're spoiled drinking wines in Napa.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I can't imagine
Yeah.
going from Napa to an Indian wine. I mean, because you go from Napa to even a wine from other places in California, it's like I forget. I forget, I freak out about some, because I want to be the best at what I'm doing. So and I freak out about, wines that I'm, tasting that are in the barrel. I'm like, oh geez, this tastes horrible. And then I taste other things and I'm like, oh, okay. Like that
Yeah.
actually, I forgot that,
Yeah.
you get that sort of imposter syndrome.
Totally.
And I felt that way just because I didn't come from an academic background, and I wasn't as smart as a lot of these people. I mean, I really, even to this day, a lot of the chemistry just makes me go cross-eyed. So I always had a chip on my shoulder for a number of reasons.
Hmm.
But speaking of that, like I want to talk a little bit, if you feel comfortable about talking a little bit about being a woman and being someone who is, from India also. Um, um, your unique set of challenges that you experienced with regards to that specifically, and then also if there are any things that you felt were advantages as well, and just how you think and feel about that whole thing now that you've come out on the other side, so to speak. Not to say that similar challenges are not presented to you now currently, because
Hmm.
I'm sure they are, but just can you sort of feel into that? I mean, not just for everyone, but especially for people who might watch this who, um, someone who is a woman who's thinking, maybe flirting with the idea of wine, or someone who is from a foreign country, or, whatever it might be. Maybe share some of that experience and what you think and feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, and this is a question I get asked quite a bit. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
definitely contemplated and, looked back on what that journey was like. And I have to say, for me, initially, at least at Davis, there was that, when you walked into a room, you were kind of the only Indian there. But at the same time, the environment at Davis was so welcoming, and
Mm-hmm.
no one ever made it a big deal that I was from India. In fact, it was almost kind of exciting. They're like, "Oh my God, someone from India is finally like trying to get into wine." And so I received so much love and support from my colleagues, my fellow students, my professors at Davis, that I think I was almost very protected at that point, about the industry. And my
Okay.
first my first like kind of negative experience was actually in Bordeaux when, um, we went into a winery to taste, and the winemaker that I was with at the time kind of was introducing us around, and he was like, and, this is Priyanka, and she's from India. And the lady who was doing our tasting was like, "Oh, from India, and you're making wine?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, anyone thinks that they can make wine now." And I was just, it was kind of a strange comment. And there have been instances when
Mm.
people have made funny comments, but I'm definitely someone that likes to give people the benefit of doubt, and I've been put in situations where you're kind of caught off guard, and then sometimes make comments in the spur of the moment and don't really realize how it gets perceived to the other person, that I've never really let it affect me in a way. I'm just like, my journey is going to be my journey, and I'm going to find the community of people around me that will support and love me through this journey and kind of encourage me along the way. And I was very grateful to continue to find those people in the industry. And one of the reasons for me to come back to Napa was because that support system existed here. You know, I had friends from Davis that were in the industry. I knew people that I knew I could reach out and email and say, I'm looking for an internship or I'm looking for a job. Um, and so I think, and then when I got my full-time position, I got it at Dollar Valley Vineyards, which is owned and operated by Naoko Dollar Valley, who's Japanese by descent. And she has kind of been managing this brand and leading, kind of paving the path for this amazing brand for close to 2 decades now since her husband passed away. And for me, that was just such a point of inspiration. It was more than just a job opportunity. I really found this amazing mentor in her. And here was another, woman of color kicking ass and doing her thing and
Right.
doing
English
it
is
at,
not her first language, right?
yeah,
She's not
yeah,
right.
and
And
doing it at the highest
highest.
level possible. And I was just like, there's no excuses. You just give your heart and soul into what you do and hope that things will happen. And, knock on wood, so far that's been a good mantra for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that is something that, as we're talking about decanting, who you are, I think that is something that people need to really recognize is that you have that frame uh, with your experiences. And that's something that I think is chosen and developed, and there's some nature to it and there's some nurture to it. But I think that it's really served you very well. I think it would serve others very well too. Um,
Yeah, and
and
I,
for the
I
very,
feel like,
oh, go ahead.
sorry. Oh no, I
No,
was
no,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
say I feel, because I've been asked this question over the years, I've always kind of held into account very highly the people that did push me forward, that did help, that land the next opportunity, that then, helped with the next thing, that then helped with the next thing. And there have been
Yeah.
some very key people that have helped me to do that. And I think, when it was my turn, when I got this position at Cinderella, right away, one of the things that was important to me was, well, how do I now give it forward? How do I, kind of help anyone else who's in this path? And it's been exciting because the last, 2 years, well, I guess three, now that we're in 2023, have been so busy in terms of what's happening at actual work, but I've also found this really great fulfillment working with some of the organizations that I do. And I'm on the board for Wine Unify that provides financial assistance and mentorship opportunities to people of color. And we've had over 100 people be able to give WSET level certifications through this program. And they don't only get, financial support for the examination, but they also get this sense of community and meet other people that are in similar points in their journey, which is so
Hmm.
exciting because sometimes that's the toughest thing, right? You move in from a different place and you don't know people, and making that connection can be tough. And so I'm so, so proud of the work we've done there. And I'm also um, the mentorship director for a program with Batanaj Forum that
Okay.
provides opportunities for women in the industry. And so this is just about having a safe space where you can have those difficult conversations of what it means to be a woman in wine, and the challenges, especially considering if you think about the role of women and the changing roles, and you go from being a young woman to becoming a wife to wanting to be a mother, and how does all of that then come into your career growth and your career development. So that's been just really, really amazing. And we've had about over 200 women participate in this mentorship program, and
Hmm.
some of them have landed jobs through it. Some of them have met their mentors in life, and some of them have made some amazing decisions for their careers through it. And it's exciting to see that momentum in the
Yeah.
industry.
It's really cool. And what I like about the concept of these mentorship type programs is that, it's not about giving anything to anyone. It's about being like a lighthouse.
Hmm.
It's about illuminating. It's about exposing. It's about saying there's safety here. That it's possible, that you can. It's about being positive and being
Hmm.
supportive.
Mhm.
and feeling like that, if you want to reach your hand out, our hand is here too,
Mhm.
and you're not alone,
Mhm.
and that could really push somebody who was on the fence to being engaged with the industry. And, for me, the more opportunity that we have to bring in more high quality talent,
Mhm.
the better, and it's partly for selfish reasons because I want to be the best, but I can't be the best unless I can beat the best
Mhm.
in a healthy way. I believe that I could be the best in the world at what I do, and everyone else could be too, which
Mhm.
sounds counterintuitive. But I'm the kind of, like there's room for everyone to be the best. There's room for everyone to be exceptional, number one, to push. It's something that like I want as much talent as I can get because it helps me so much.
Mhm.
Helps challenge me to be better.
Yeah.
Um, and
Rising
it
tide lifts all boats, right?
rising tide, absolutely. And you know, so doing things like with these mentorship programs to be like that lighthouse and that beacon and that sense of support and that place to land. If I take the leap, is there some spot for me to land? Is such a great service to the wine industry in general. You know what I mean? Not just to those specific groups of people,
Mhm.
whether it's women or persons of color or whatever it is that you're focusing on. It's really for the whole industry in that sense. When you're bringing in high quality people, and in a way too, and this is always sort of a tricky thing because it's that general idea of like, well, you start to get kind of philosophical about like, well, it's the contrast and the pain and the difficulties in life that allow you to learn and grow from those
Mhm.
things and then breathe meaning into the experience of life. Like life is very
Mhm.
meaningful because it's temporary, because there are these difficulties. But it's like, as a parent, for example, I'm thinking, okay, but I also don't want my kid to roll down the street and get hit by a car, or like to experience bullying. I don't want one of my daughters to be, sexually harassed or something, or like,
Mhm.
so it's like, so in my heart, I always try to like balance these things because I do see like there is a certain amount of callousing that is a positive thing in life
Mhm.
in general. And you just see it. Like there are people that are not prepared for life because they were not calloused enough,
Mhm.
in whatever way that is. They weren't emotionally prepared for the realities of life. They weren't physically prepared, or a little bit of both, mentally prepared. And they get out and it really shot them in the foot, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so, but where do that balance, right? Because again, I'm thinking about my kids. Like, I know that a lot of their challenges and difficulties are going to give them the opportunity to learn and grow if they choose to do that.
Mhm.
And, but I also want to, protect my children, so it's like, how do you, I don't know, how do you find that balance of like trying to make things, trying to prevent people from being hurt and
Mhm.
harmed or dissuaded from being in this industry.
Mhm.
Um, and then also trying to allow them the privilege, which is life is a privilege, the privilege of being able to breathe meaning into suffering and into life and to grow as individuals and to become lighthouses and beacons themselves. And to sort of so how do you find that balance? And I don't know the answer, but I'm always trying to think and feel into that answer because I know that like too much of one thing is not a good thing. And how do I feel into to what that is? I don't know if that even makes sense to you or not, or really where I'm going with that. But I think it's such an interesting thing to think about, because I think in a lot of ways, your challenges have put you in a place now where you're doing all this good for these people,
Mhm.
and you are also not condescending them. You are, like I said, acting like a lighthouse and a beacon, and a sense of support. Hey, your journey may or may not be difficult, whatever it might be, and it will be unique to you, but I'm here for you.
Mhm.
I'm here to support you. I'm here to encourage you, not to do the work for you, but to tell you that if you want to do it, that while there may be challenges, you do also have friends and support. And
Mhm.
that's a really, really cool, powerful thing to do. And you're put in this position now in part because of your unique set of circumstances and experiences along the way.
Mhm.
And so that's always just something interesting to think about, and try to mull around in your mind, and in your heart. Like, where is that help? Where is that balance, and what does it mean to me? What part does
Well,
that play in the whole story?
I think in the context of the wine industry specifically, what I found is this industry is not for everyone. It takes a very unique kind of person, especially if you're on, the production vineyard side of
Hmm.
things. Um, you kind of have to have a tough skin, you can't just be in your emotions sometimes, or it's a tough industry. Harvest is long hours and it doesn't stop at harvest. Then you have the stress of bottling, you have the stress of making sure everything's working well in the winery, you're hitting your goals, all of that stuff. And what I've loved and found and seen through these amazing individuals that have come in connection with me through the mentorship program is to see how people respond, and
Hmm.
when that connection is made of this is my industry of passion. Because
Right.
the minute that connection is made of I love this so much that I'm going to do what I need to in order to succeed, you
Hmm.
automatically have found the kind of people that will evolve into talented, amazing
Right.
individuals that will contribute to the industry. And sometimes you open those doors of opportunity for people and they go, you know what? Not my thing. And at that point, it's just exciting that they were at least able to experience it, because it is such a unique industry. It is such a different lifestyle almost in a way. And so for me, I've found that being a very fun intersection of seeing how people respond to situations, and what kind of pushes them forward. I've also seen what's been so exciting is women coming in saying, I want to be in the vineyard, or I want to do sales, or I want to do something else. And then they go through this mentorship program and talk to these different women that made decisions based on what was happening in their life personally or professionally. And people have switched careers and found more fulfillment, excitement, and success in an aspect of the industry that they didn't necessarily gravitate towards right away.
Right.
And
Right.
so for me, I think that's been the more exciting thing, is really helping people identify their skill set, identify their um, passion, and where does that really fit into the industry. Not everyone can be a winemaker, but not everyone can be a wine salesman. Not
Totally.
everyone can handle distribution, not everyone can handle hospitality. Like, if you were to tell me I need to meet with people every day and talk about wine and give this spiel about the products and everything, I don't know if I could do it. It's just
Right.
not something that's very exciting for me. So um I feel, my philosophy with this is you open the door and the right people will walk through it, and they'll do wonderful things with the opportunity that's given to them.
I uh, I love so much of that, what you just had to say, and it's like sending my mind in a thousand different directions. But it really is so good to hear because your perspective and the way that you're approaching all of these things that you just spoke about is so needed, and it's very rare. It's very rare because and I think that this is now hearing your story, it makes a little bit more sense to me. Um, Kind of how you were pieced together through your experiences, through your understanding of your own, like, I believe that everyone has a consciousness that is a fractal of one light, so to speak, in many different dimensional experiences simultaneously. Like, and that's kind of a lot. But the point is that while we're all connected, we're all eternally unique, and so there is some sort of spark within you that is unique to you and
Hmm.
can be expressed in this lifetime in a myriad of ways, but not the least of which is, of course, doing something like what you're doing, right? So it's interesting to see how this has all come to where you are now. But what you've done and what you've just said is really powerful, because you're not jumping from one extreme to the other. You're not just rolling into one easy narrative that would be whatever that would be easy for you. You're really thinking multidimensionally about this. You're thinking in a way that is very specific and very general at the same time. That's a sign of intelligence. You're being realistic, which is refreshing. You're being real, right? No, because it's clear to me that you understand the difference between love and codependence,
Mm-hmm.
and not a lot of people do these days, and it's something I've had to learn myself the hard way, and a lot of things that I thought were love were actually codependence, and I
Mm-hmm.
see now more clearly how it was harmful and regressive in a sense. And so what you're really offering people is it's such a powerful thing to empower individuals, but
Mm-hmm.
also to say, like you said, hey, this might not be for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you said like this industry's tough, and like it's like you realize like there's a certain level of that callousing, and there's a certain level of like, hey, you know what? I don't want just anybody in this business. I
Mm-hmm.
want people who are trying to be the best because they inspire me, they
Mm-hmm.
motivate me. They're trying to be the best, but they're not selfish. They want everybody else to be the best too, but they're going to hold a high standard because that's what really helps me. And you're giving these people an opportunity to say yes to something. And I really believe in the sovereignty of the individual in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Super important to me. That whatever you choose, we may label as good or bad, and I can understand why those labels are there. But at the end of the day, it's all experience, and you're either getting closer to knowing yourself more by knowing what you are attracted to and what feels good, or
Mm-hmm.
you're getting closer by knowing what you're not attracted to and what doesn't feel good and what you don't
Mm-hmm.
like. And so either way, you're learning and growing. But the point is to feel empowered so that you are making these decisions and you're taking responsibility for them and you're learning through them and you're growing through them. And to steal that freedom of choice from an individual in any way, I think is a horrible thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a beautiful thing when you offer and empower people to make choices and to have experiences and to come up against those things and see what they feel like to them and see
Mm-hmm.
what that experience, how that manifests for them, and not try to force them into a box or
Mm-hmm.
just meet some kind of quota. And so that's really cool and refreshing for me to see and hear from you. And I think you're doing a great job. And I hope you understand that it's really a rare thing to see.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, one of the, you talked about Dalla Valle, and,
Mm-hmm.
for the very few people that might be watching this, and actually there might be a lot of people watching this that don't know what the hell that is. You know, Dalla Valle is one of the best brands and terroirs in the world. It's on my short list of, when people say, what are your favorite wines? There's like 3 or 4 brands that I put out there. Dalla Valle has always been one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The vineyards up there are unbelievable. I got to work a lot in East Oakville, and then over the hill, I got to work with the White's Vineyard right nearby,
Mm-hmm.
and just up on that backside there, near Morlaix and Dalla Valle and all of that. It's pretty special,
Mm-hmm.
and I still consider it East Oakville, even though it's not. But in that East Oakville area, East Oakville for me, and I have a lot of experience in Oakville in general, East and West, and in the middle of Oakville and everywhere in between. East Oakville is so interesting because it's so much more challenging than West Oakville.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie. If I had to pick a spot to make wine from, like Vine Hill Ranch, Tokelan was great, but Vine Hill Ranch to me is as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
West Oakville is just a slam dunk,
Mm-hmm.
but it's easier to make wines in West Oakville than East Oakville and up on that
Mm-hmm.
hillside. So when you're on that eastern side, the wines, you really have to know each row. You have such a small space, such a small window of balance, and it's different for each little tiny aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to be plugged in. And so it's much more difficult. And even the fermentations, when you're comparing a West Oakville fermentation to an East Oakville, it's so much easier. It's almost dummy proof on the West. On the East, the fermentations can be a little bit more like, hey, if you don't watch it, you're going to pull too much tannin. You're going to, and so it's kind of like, I've always loved those wines from the East because it's been such a challenge. but the
Mm-hmm.
reward is so great. And there's a type of very specific acute. There's like an acute vibe. They're wines that are very like, hey, I'm here, but also very alluring and
Mm-hmm.
and, and gentle. And that kind of juxtaposition, I think, has always been so fascinating. So if you hit the nail on the head with wines from that area, they're some of the best in the world. And Dalla
Mm-hmm.
Valle really is probably the best to do it out there. So the fact that you were there is pretty darn cool. What are just quickly, some of your thoughts and feelings about that terroir, um, and then how that maybe changed how you think about the concept of terroir and what that means in winemaking?
Well, I had, you know, I started on when you're kind of entering the industry and you're on the cellar production side, the choices of the wineries that you end up working in really does dictate where in the industry you end up landing. And I really believe this because I feel like those experiences either make or break your decision to go down one path or the other. And so the concept of terroir and the concept of sites had already been something that was very important to me from my experience in Burgundy. So I worked at Hospice de Beaune in Burgundy, and we were making like 32 different Pinots and 16 different Chardonnays from individual vineyards all around Côte de Beaune, Côte de Noir, Côte de Nuit. But each wine had such an individuality and such an expression, and it was treated like that by the cellar staff. So that was something that I just found absolutely fascinating, and I knew that was, what I wanted to do. That was the path I wanted to take. And so when I had the opportunity to even interview with Dollar Valley, I was so excited because that was the embodiment of that
Mm-hmm.
know your site, understand it, and then learn what's the best way to express it that I really wanted to do. And so um, when I joined, it was just such an amazing experience because, like you said, it is a more challenging site especially where Dollar Valley sits. It sits on that eastern Oakville plateau, so there's no lack of exposure. That's
Right.
almost your biggest challenge when it comes to the amount of solar and heat exposure you can get up there. But it's also a very special site because of like the soil composition, because of just what you can do in terms of catching that window of ripeness. And so there's this ability to really play around and almost have fun with your site, just even based on, in some years, on a small 5-day picking window. Some people would say,
Yes.
oh, but what's a 5-day window going to do? But it does a lot when you're in a site like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was, and then just working with the caliber of people at the estate. I mean, Naoko was, of course, the kind of glue that kept it all together, and she had a very clear vision and just clarity on what needed to get done and expected things to be done at the highest quality level. And her daughter Maya, that is now taken over, has that same um, uh, dedication when it comes to vision and thought. But I was also working with Andy Erickson and Michel Roland and, people that have been making wine at that highest caliber level, but not based on a recipe, based on truly the power of their palate and the power of their understanding of sight. So that was something that was just an incredible learning experience for me there. It was also um, it was also about that the symbiosis that you need between vineyard and winery. So it wasn't there was that there was a huge interplay between the two, and almost I would say sometimes the vineyard site took precedence over what was happening in the winery. And for me, that is the core to good wines, is you just put 90% of your work into the vineyard, and then you can almost be kind of lazy in the cellar sometimes because that incoming quality of fruit is so high, so spectacular that you almost just need to guide it along the way as opposed to manipulating it almost. Um, but I think one of the biggest learning experiences was that entirety of vision that Naoko brought to the table. She was not, her vision was all the way from the vineyard to packaging to mailing list to communication with client, and she really kind of gave me range in terms of what I was able to explore and what I was able to participate in while at the winery. And so it is such a special site. It really is a unique site. Like you said, when we were picking, we were making decisions row by row, sometimes vine by vine. And when the fruit came into the winery, even from a 30-acre property like that, in some years there would be 45, 50 different wines that would be made from even a small planted acreage like that. And just that focus of we're going to do whatever we need to extract the best quality of this site for that vintage was just incredible. And I think I take a lot of that with me to Signorello because it is a similar concept. It is an estate vineyard. We are building a winery, and I hope that in the years that I'm with them, that I give due credence to the site, give due uh, give the right expression to what the site has to offer, and make wines that truly help mark this spot as its own unique terroir as well. And that takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of familiarity with your blocks, with your fruit, with your property, with your staff, with your crew. And it's been an exciting journey to get to know it and continue to kind of make those decisions to lead it along the way.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes of this whole thing because Cinderella is something that I always knew about the property. It was there, but I never really looked into it much. I've had the wines a few times, but that was about it. And I think that you know I look at where it is, and I think to myself like, there's a lot still there that is yet to be discovered. And I think that you are like the perfect person for that place. I mean, it's pretty cool that you landed there and that now you're going through this phase where you're going to have a winery that you had a heavy hand in designing, which is amazing. And you're going to be able to bring those experiences from Napa Valley and other places that you've been to a place like that. And that combination is pretty incredible. I mean, you're kind of poised to start a totally new era in that region. I think it's going to benefit that whole area over there in a lot of ways. So it's super cool. I don't think it's an accident that you ended up where you are. I don't believe in accidents, but I'm really excited to see kind of where this whole thing goes and to follow along. I was thinking about work and how I kind of ran into you and my experience, and it's pretty obvious to see like the story is really inspiring. It's really interesting. You as an individual, I think you're just so unique for a lot of reasons, which is great. And I try to boil it down to like what are some of the key reasons that I wanted you to be on here and to have this interaction, because the wine industry in general, but also just the Napa wine industry, it's not in an isolated environment. It's a part of the world, and the world we live in right now just seems like like something out of like a story or something, or it seems so crazy, right? People I think are having a hard time, for a lot of reasons, and it seems very very much tense and everything, and with that I think a lot of people become defensive and maybe closed in, and and that creates separation in various ways. And anytime we feel isolated and separated, I think it really harms not just us as people, but I think it hurts the industry, because I really do think that we're stronger when we can feel connected to each other and when we can share with each other and feel comfortable doing that. feeling safe to do that. And so, when we're very different people, obviously, but in a lot of ways, I really feel the same way you do. And I think that right there is something that is really cool that I'd like to highlight, that I feel exactly the way you do in a lot of ways, and yet we have totally different experiences, and we're very different people. And also, it's one thing to have an idea of a person, to hear about things, and it's another thing to experience that person. And I'm really big on experience. In other words, especially today with social media and how we're so, there's not as much in-person connection that we tend to, I think people miss a lot of people. And so when I had interactions and experiences with you, it really stood out to me because you had this rare ability to be very present. You certainly have your own personality, and you're not afraid to show that and engage and just, be yourself. But you had this very interesting ability that I felt to take yourself aside and to view and be present with the person that's in front of you in a way that was without as much bias as possible, with just being present for them. And so as somebody talking to you and interacting with you, the experience felt meaningful. It felt safe. It felt non-judgmental. It felt empowering in that sense, and very meaningful. Even just arbitrary, like, hey, da 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 da. That's an incredible ability. That's a very special skill and talent. And for various reasons, I'm a unique individual. I tend to have a bigger personality, and I get out there, and that's it's a good thing, and I'm glad for that, certainly. But that also opens you up to vulnerability. And so I certainly have been and felt very judged in my experience. Very misrepresented in certain ways, and I have so much love for people in general, but for this industry, that it's a challenge of mine, because it's a pain and a struggle that I have to go through within myself. And so when I experience somebody who I feel is really being present and is offering that gift of their presence, and that in a non-judgmental way, in a very open way, I'm thinking, first of all, how grateful I am for that, and how inspiring that is, and how uplifting that is. But also I'm thinking, like, this is the future. Because I definitely see that we as an industry need to find ways to connect with each other on a human level much more than we have been in recent times, for a lot of reasons. And I really want to see more of that. And I feel like more people like you, with your presence and your approach, is how we get there. And so I'm like, I want to make sure to uplift this person. It makes me want to have a lot of respect for you, and you've earned it through the way that you ought to earn that, which is how you actually are, boots on the ground. And I remember one time, quickly, during harvest, when you were processing some fruit, and you invited me over to help sort the fruit as it was coming down the line. And I think maybe you'll understand why that was such an important moment, because of your experience. And I know that you really love wine, and you get it. You understand it on that deep level that I do as well. As a winemaker, that is a sacred thing. That's a very sacred process. It's a very sacred thing. It's a very intimate thing. And the way that your energy was just no hesitation, pure, open, a high vibration, welcoming, and just like, hey, welcome in to this experience. And to have hands on that fruit is so meaningful to me with my history and experience of making wines, and how connected I feel to every drop that I've ever been a part of co-creating with. To now have a connection to that and to share that with you for that small moment was so significant and meaningful to me, and it was such a sign of respect, and it really left a huge impression upon me, of you as a person. And it made me think again, kind of like how we need more of this. We really need more of this in this industry, and so that was really the driving force behind me thinking, like, I really want to have Priyanka on the show. I really want people to get to know her a little bit, because I think that you're one of the real good people in this industry, and
Thank
it
you.
makes it's there are some dark sides to this industry, and that there is some struggle and some things that suck. And so when you look to the things that are really, really shining lights in this business, you're grateful for those things. And I think you're one of those shining lights. And so I would just say that, thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. And I think it's really cool. And you're just getting started, which is the exciting thing,
Thank you.
Um, I like to kind of wrap things up by allowing you to just be able to maybe share something that you feel compelled to share, or think about, maybe if you had an opportunity to, speak to your younger self and give some advice, what kind of general wisdom that you would give to yourself, or thoughts or ideas, or anything that you'd like to say or bring up, or anything I missed that you feel is important, give you the opportunity to kind of take it from there, and maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. This has been such a fascinating, fun conversation, because I feel like we touched so many aspects, and it wasn't just about like the technical side, like, how did you become a winemaker, and, what did you do? And
Right.
it was a very genuine, open conversation. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and have that conversation with you. I think, for me, the one thing that, if I was to tell my younger self anything, because I think that's just such a great question. You always want to be, you always want to kind of look back and say what worked, what didn't work, and what
Mhm.
about my personality has evolved and what needs to evolve. I think that's a very important aspect of growth as a human. Um, I think, the younger me was always like, God, I hope this works out. So, so I really wish that, if I had an opportunity, I'd go back and say, it's going to be great. Like, just enjoy it in the moment. Don't be so stressed about,
Mhm.
do you have the money to make the flight or the visa? Like, I had a lot of issues with visa, so I had to give up opportunities to work at wineries um, which would have been just incredible experiences, but I just couldn't do it because of visa and travel related restrictions. And at that point, I remember just being really kind of down about it. And now I look back and I go, it would have been incredible to have that experience, but whatever else worked out for a reason. So I'm a big believer in kind of, things are meant to happen. And even if they're
Right.
really negative things, like, especially when it's a very negative thing, that's when this belief of, no, this was supposed to happen to you for a reason, and what are you going to
Right.
do with it is important for me. I think it's easy to revel in the good stuff. It's easy to be like,
Right.
yeah, that's awesome. It's something that I always tell other people. I'm like, you should be excited when things go wrong, because there's so much opportunity to learn
Yeah.
and grow from that. And yeah, it's upsetting, and you kind of makes you question yourself depending on what that mistake or negative experience might be. But if you address it correctly, you will find that it actually gave you so much more than the one positive or than the one good thing that happened. And the last thing for me is community. We're in this industry where I think the generation above us, a lot of the success that came into this industry also came with this sense of isolation, where brands started to kind of do their own thing, and it became more secretive, and we're we're not going to tell anyone how we make wine and things like that. I don't believe that at all because, I think you and I could pick fruit from the same vineyard on the same day and we will make very different wines. And that's
Yeah.
the reality of it. I cannot do what you do and you cannot do what I do. And that's what's exciting about it. So for me, like, bringing you to the table was again a learning thing for me because I was like, I wonder what David's going to say when he looks at this fruit and he tastes it. Like, I want to know what his reaction is going to be to it because there's so much learning from community and from bringing people from different aspects to help you expand your perception and your perspective. And I see that happening in the industry now. I see this like spirit of collaboration. I see this spirit of hey, I'm gonna come over and taste barrels with you. Like, come on over and let's figure out this vintage together. Let's figure out what's working, what's not working, and it's exciting. I think, in spite of the journey of the Napa industry, I still think as an industry we're young. And there's still a lot more to be written when it comes to the history of Napa. And it's just exciting to be here, and it's exciting to be in this region. And I'm excited for what's happening at Signorello. I mean, this was a pretty unique, once in a lifetime opportunity to come to a brand that's been around but has this, chance to rebuild and recreate and reinstall, if you will. And it's incredible to be a part of something like that. So if there's anyone out there that's thinking about getting into the industry, I would say don't say no unless you experience it. Like, definitely give yourself the chance to experience it, whether it's traveling to a wine region, whether it's taking a month off and working harvest, whether it's working in a tasting room, whatever it is that you think works for you, definitely experience it because it's just such a wonderful, amazing lifestyle, and it just brings you close to nature. It brings you humility and patience, and it just helps you become a better person. So, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And I think, again, I just love what you're saying, and I definitely vibe with that sentiment as well. It's a great message. So cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that we finally got to make it work. And,
Yeah.
I'm excited. Like I said, I'm excited to see, what comes of all this. It's a really cool thing you got going on at Signorello. And whatever you're doing for the rest of your career, I'm excited to be a colleague and to be someone that's a fan and that looks forward to seeing what you got going. And if you ever need anything, reach out to me. I'm always here for any reason, any way, even non-wine related. I'm here for you. And thank you again so much for spending the time to be here
Yeah,
with
same
us.
here. Thanks so much. Happy New Year. Let's get
Happy New Year. All right.
it. Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dave. Bye.
Yep.